Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?
When you think of Six Flags Great America, most people picture the warm and sunny summer days, the roar of the park's 16 different roller coasters, and the smell of asphalt and funnel cakes. However, for a brief period of time, Six Flags Great America extended its season into a winter wonderland known as Holiday in the Park. Why hasn't it come back? And better yet, will it ever return? It's now been 4 seasons since Six Flags Great America has hosted this fan-favorite seasonal event, which only lasted for a total of 4 seasons, from 2018 to 2021. There are various reasons why this event didn't last, and I'm here to unpack that for you. This video looks back at the rise and fall of Holiday in the Park, what worked, what didn't, and why Great America's festive experiment vanished in the winter's night. For starters, Holiday in the Park had been a staple at other Six Flags parks for years before finally arriving at Great America in 2018. Six Flags Great America started experimenting with extending the season post-Fright Fest as early as 2016, with the bonus weekend immediately following the closing weekends of Fright Fest. The park was lucky, as the weather on this weekend was in the 70s and saw a big influx of guests getting in their last rides before the off-season. The following year, the park continued their experiment, extending the season by 3 weeks to November 19, 2017. 2017's extended season was advertised as a new seasonal event dubbed Last Call Fall Festival. Locals and diehard coaster fans still showed up for this event, but otherwise, Last Call Fall Festival didn't really appeal to the rest of the general public. I believe these 2 consecutive seasons where they offered bonus weekends were a pilot to see if bringing Holiday in the Park to Great America would make sense. In the park's eyes, I guess it did. Finally, in the spring of 2018, the park would tease the event and officially announce that Holiday in the Park would be coming to Six Flags Great America. Last Call Fall Festival returned again in 2018, bridging the gap between Fright Fest and the brand new Holiday in the Park event. On Friday, November 23, 2018, Holiday in the Park officially kicked off at Six Flags Great America. I vividly remember working on Holiday in the Park's opening day, and it was absolutely freezing outside. Most rides would open late, which, as you'll find out, was one of the event's downfalls. But despite the cold, crowds still showed up, eager to see Great America like never before. I was always impressed with the way the park dressed up each area. Great America was completely transformed. Each section became its own themed holiday land, glowing with lights, decorations, and soundtracks tailored to the holiday season. Carousel Plaza turned into elegance, which made a grand statement for guests entering the park. Hometown Square was transformed into Holiday Square, keeping a cozy, feel-good vibe to this classic area of the park. Southwest Territory became Kaleidoscope, an LED-filled extravaganza. County Fair was split into 2 sections, Merry Marketplace and the North Pole, which featured heavy Christmas theming and, of course, Santa Claus. Yukon Territory turned into Home for the Holidays, which was probably the coziest and my personal favorite section of the park. Interestingly enough, in its inaugural season, Yankee Harbor was just Yankee Harbor. I always found this to be quite odd. However, in the other seasons of Holiday in the Park, Yankee Harbor was themed to Jolly Lane, an EDM dance party land. Rounding out the different areas, Mardi Gras was Merry Mardi Gras, and Orleans Place was another split land, becoming Jingle Bell Jazz and Snowman City, right on theme with its loose French Quarter theming. The park also cut off access to the Demon Midway, funneling all guests through Southwest Territory in order to reach the county fair area. So, the park was a true complete loop for Holiday in the Park. The park was open on weekends and select weekdays through December 31st. The park also featured a unique set of hours for Holiday in the Park, opening each day at 2 o'clock and closing at either 8 or 9 o'clock p.m. These hours were perfect for Holiday in the Park. 2018's Holiday in the Park brought some decent entertainment options as well. Outside of the many different characters regularly roaming around the park, there were a few new original shows brought exclusively to Six Flags Great America for the event. Wonderland at the Grand and Looney Tunes Christmas were 2 live shows performed in the Grand Music Hall. The Snowshoe Saloon also saw its first show in many years with Holiday Hoedown. There was also the classic Santa Claus meet and greet at the North Pole Express, which was housed at the County Fair train station. Kaleidoscope was a unique LED show in Southwest Territory. A massive frame filled with LED lights was erected around the Southwest Territory Mission. A light show synced with music was displayed around the building. Although it was very bright, it looked pretty sick when working properly. Giant Drop was also outfitted with lights that hung from the catch wagons at the top of the tower, resembling a Christmas tree. It was such a nice visual in the park, and you could even see it shining bright from the surrounding Gurney area. There were also a few s'mores locations scattered around the park, where guests could buy a kit and roast their own marshmallows over a fire pit. Another staple of this event was the hot chocolate. The park even sold custom cups each year for the hot cocoa. Now, most importantly, let's touch on Holiday in the Park's ride product. 2018 featured the most robust lineup of all 4 years, and truthfully, 2018 and 2019 were really the only years to experience rides because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The 2018 lineup featured 8 roller coasters in total, including Superman Ultimate Flight, the Dark Knight Coaster, the Joker, Batman the Ride, Vertical Velocity, Sprocket Rockets, X-Flight, and Raging Bull. If you ask me, this was actually a pretty solid lineup, which is better than some parks' normal operating coaster lineups. The park chose rides that they thought would be most reliable in the cold weather, as well as rides whose manufacturers allowed them to operate in cold temperatures. Nonetheless, Great America would soon figure out the hard truth with some of these coasters. In addition, there were a good amount of flat rides open as well, most notably Justice League Battle for Metropolis, Snowflake Lane, which was a winter transformation of the Rula Dodge bumper cars, and Peppermint Swirl, which was Chubasco. More like Terror Twister 2, but with holiday music. Man, Peppermint Swirl was such a vibe. I'll throw a list on the screen of the lineup in its entirety, so pause here to take a longer look. Really, the flats that weren't chosen just were not able to reliably operate in cold temperatures, just like the coasters. This also probably helped give the maintenance team a solid set of rides to begin off-season maintenance on. There was no other feeling than riding rides like Raging Bull and Batman in frigid weather. I even recall days riding Raging Bull during a decent snowfall. It was so worth it, if you could brave the cold. On the other hand, it was quite miserable operating the attractions because of the freezing temperatures. Most often, the roller coasters would only be running one train during Holiday in the Park, so there was a lot of standing around. This made sense though, because the crowds never really warranted more than one train. There were only a handful of days when lines would ever surpass 15 minutes in length. Otherwise, you were guaranteed a walk-on for all the roller coasters. It was truly a coaster fanatic's paradise. Even though I cannot stand the cold, I found myself unable to resist riding my favorite coasters later into the year. It was also the first time ever most people were able to experience roller coasters in a holiday atmosphere. Holiday in the Park did a phenomenal job at capturing the essence of the holiday season. Between the cold, snow, lights, and holiday music, it was a Christmas lover's dream. I can't say enough how well the teams at Great America did at transforming the park for this event. A substantial number of guests would come to Holiday in the Park, not to ride the rides, but to experience the Christmas aesthetic at their home park. Holiday in the Park was a true first-of-its-kind experience for Great America. Moving on to the 2019 season, there were some upgrades and downgrades to the event. First, there were 2 notable shows added to the entertainment lineup. Elves Live, which was exactly as the name describes, and the Mistletones, an a cappella group. There were also more upgrades to the amount of lights around the park, and lots of new decorations as well. As I mentioned earlier, the park also decided to theme Yankee Harbor to Jolly Lane this year, adding a theming uniformity to the park. Pleasant weather was few and far between, yet again, for most of the season. In terms of the downgrades, Superman and Joker were removed from the coaster lineup. These 2 rides had their fair share of cold weather difficulties in 2018, so the park removed them from the 2019 lineup. Less notably, Hometown Fun Machine was also not included in 2019's event. However, for compensation, Mardi Gras Hangover and Big Easy Balloons were added, making for the most lopsided trade in ride availability history. The park would close on New Year's Eve in 2019, and that would forever mark a turning point in Holiday in the Park's history. We all know what went down in 2020, and you may remember the impact it had on Great America. Because of Illinois' draconian COVID-19 guidelines, Six Flags Great America never opened for the regular season in 2020. Illinois guidelines stated that amusement rides, like roller coasters, were not allowed to operate, so the park didn't open for the summer. However, Illinois did allow outdoor, non-contact activities as long as social distancing rules were followed. This opened a narrow window for Six Flags Great America to host a modified version of Holiday in the Park. After what seemed like an eternity, Great America finally opened for the 2020 season on November 27th. The modified event was dubbed Holiday in the Park Lights, and that's essentially what it was. Holiday in the Park with no rides, just lights. While there were no rides, it was definitely nice to be back inside the gates of Great America. This yearning to be back led to a pretty successful Holiday in the Park Lights event. The park essentially ran just like any other seasonal outdoor lights festival, including tons of food and a modified edition of the park's regular holiday entertainment offerings. 2020 also saw the debut of Holiday in the Park Lights drive-thru experience. This was a unique experience where guests drove their cars through Great America. Guests would enter through backstage, following a slow, guided route through the midways. Park music, holiday soundtracks, and themed announcements played through the car radio. It felt like a behind-the-scenes experience mixed with a holiday lights festival. This also required a very minimal set of labor, leading to a low overhead operational cost. Let me tell you though, this was a cold and miserable event to work, but it was definitely sick for guests to be able to drive through the park. The drive-through event might have just been the biggest hit in Holiday in the Park's 4-season run. So many guests came to experience the park in their cars each night. Attendance for the drive-through event was even higher than the walk-through-only Lights rendition. The drive-through ran through mid-January, marking the only time the park was technically open in January. Funny enough, I remember during the 2021 preseason, crews spent a lot of time cleaning up oil spills scattered throughout the park's midways from all the cars coming through. Speaking of the 2021 season, this would be the last season for any form of Holiday in the Park. The event returned as Holiday in the Park Lights for a second consecutive season. Holiday Lights would operate on weekends, and the drive-thru would return to operate on select weekdays. It's important to note, however, that select rides would return in 2021. There would be a very small amount of ride availability, including the Dark Knight Coaster, Justice League, Peppermint Swirl, and a few other flats. At this point, Holiday in the Park was a shell of its original self. There were no major thrill rides open, and frankly, it wasn't necessary, but I'll dive into that in a minute. Besides the return of a few rides, the event was essentially unchanged from 2020. Now, I want to talk about the downfall of Holiday in the Park and why it will most likely never return. First and foremost, the main reason being that the park was not making money off the event. In its short run, 2018 and 2019 were the only 2 years the event actually operated as originally intended. As nice as it was for us enthusiasts to get some extra rides in before the heart of winter, Holiday in the Park was no different than any other outdoor lights experience. This just happened to take place in a well-known and loved amusement park. An overwhelming majority of guests were season pass holders who got into the park for free. Thus, little money was generated from ticket sales. Plus, many pass holders also had dining plans, which essentially allowed them to eat at the event for free. Ask your non-theme park friends and family and see how many of them flocked to Great America just to experience the lights. I bet it's few and far between. While I personally love the event, it just didn't make sense to keep the park open if it wasn't making them money. Without cash flow, keeping the park open into the winter months was not ethical. It is a business after all. The following are some tidbits of true information regarding Holiday in the Park. Great America never saw a positive return on investment throughout the 4 years that the event went on, outside of the drive-thru experience in 2020. Most days, the park was an absolute ghost town. Almost every day the park operated, especially in 2020 and 2021, staffing was significantly cut mid-shift because the place was just so empty. The park was spending more to keep the place staffed and operating than it was bringing in from attending guests. These facts also help seal the fate of major rides ever operating again during Holiday in the Park after the 2020 Holiday Lights season. Additionally, the cold temperatures are not nice on the rides maintenance-wise. The park saw no decrease in attendance for the event in 2020 without rides, hence why they chose to only operate a select few attractions in 2021. I mean, why run the major coasters when there is no significant change in attendance without them? The park knew that the small number of people that did come to Holiday in the Park would attend with or without the coasters. It would be interesting to see the exact ratio of season pass holders to daily ticket buyers. For those looking for a Holiday Lights experience, there were definitely plenty of alternative options for a lower price. Great America was catering to its loyal fan base, and sadly, the loyal fan base isn't what brings in the cash. The aforementioned maintenance issues are a perfect segue to my next point on why Holiday in the Park won't return. If you're from the Milwaukee-Chicago area, then you know how harsh and unpredictable the winter weather can be. Unfortunately, many of the Holiday in the Park days were in the 40s or lower, leading to a less than desirable experience. Who else besides coaster enthusiasts actually want to ride roller coasters in this weather? The frigid temperatures and occasional snowfall even led to the park closing early, or not even opening at all many days. I've had several Holiday in the Park shifts where I've showed up, only for me to wrangle my team around 30 minutes later to tell them to go home because the park is not opening because of the weather. Those days were definitely net losses in revenue for the park. When the park did remain open, the weather was still adverse enough to keep a majority of people from riding the coasters. In fact, the main thing that prevented guests from riding was the extremely cold temperatures. Rider comfort was a huge concern, and even more so, if it was below freezing, most rides were unable to operate anyways. Temperature thresholds were an absolute necessity with the temperamental winter weather. Even if it was not necessarily below freezing, operating roller coasters in the cold has its fair share of issues. For one, these coasters were not intended to be consistently run in cold weather conditions. You've got to think, outside of a few weekends of Fright Fest, these coasters have rarely ran in consistently cold temperatures. This posed a myriad of maintenance issues. The major coasters experienced more downtime than usual during Holiday in the Park. Rides like Raging Bull needed to have their train's wheels heated hours before making their first test laps. This was to ensure that the trains would make it through their course and not valley, as cold weather poses significant valley risk. Operators were told not to let the trains idle in the station too long, and they'd sometimes need to send empty cycles until guests showed up to ride just to keep the wheels warm. This was also why it was the norm to see one-train operations. That way, trains weren't sitting out in the cold, idling for too long. That's how deep the weather issue was. On top of that, metal shrinks in cold weather, which can alter the precise alignment of track sections and supports. Grease and hydraulic fluids thicken or lose viscosity in cold conditions, potentially causing increased friction in wheel assemblies, brakes, and lift chains, leading to higher wear or slower operation. Temperature fluctuations also had an effect on proximity sensors and pneumatic systems that rely on constant air pressure and temperature. These are some of the reasons why Superman and the Joker didn't return to the ride lineup in 2019. Additionally, Vertical Velocity closed early for the season during 2018's Holiday in the Park because of a small stress fracture in the track. While I can't confirm that the fracture was because of the cold, I definitely believe it had something to do with it. All these possible issues put a significant strain on an already understaffed maintenance department. I also need to mention that the extension of the operating season meant that there was less time to accomplish any off-season maintenance. Sure, they could start working on the rides not included in the lineup, but it still caused notable setbacks. Overall, I believe Holiday in the Park just doesn't make sense in a cold weather climate. People want to come to Great America for the rides, but it wasn't a roller coaster event. Holiday in the Park wasn't even a break-even event on most days. And if the emphasis is on a Holiday Lights experience, there are just too many alternatives. In short, it wasn't worth the hassle. Furthermore, the park recently got rid of many of their holiday decorations, sending them to other parks that still host the event. I don't see Holiday in the Park coming back to Great America in the foreseeable future, and probably not ever for that matter. If you still don't believe me, take a listen to what Park President John Kraniak had to say about Holiday in the Park earlier this year.
It honestly came down to dollars. I love the experience. I advocated for that. I fought for it. I wanted to keep it going, and up until that last year, where that was, we had a little drive-through going, a little walk-through going, and it just didn't turn the profit that it needed to. It was about cash flow. A lot of season pass attendance, a little too much in the mix. That doesn't bring cash to extending the operation to that end. It was a local decision. It was. And I hear a lot of people will also say, well, the weather. If weather was 40 degrees every single day, it didn't do it. It just didn't get there. I think it really comes down to the brand and the association with the rides. And that's not what that event was. You weren't coming in December to ride Raging Bull. The park was beautiful. We did everything we could. So I don't see it in the immediate future, but who knows beyond that as to where we may come around again.
Well, there you have it. All in all, Holiday in the Park will always be a unique chapter in the park's history. It was a bold experiment that just didn't make sense for a park in a cold climate. It launched with genuine ambition in 2018, transforming the park in ways we'd never seen before and giving coaster fans the surreal joy of riding in the snow. But as the seasons went on and COVID threw in a wrench, the cracks showed. The event simply wasn't bringing in the money to justify operating deep into the winter season. It's honestly unfortunate that this beloved event didn't end up making sense at our park from a business standpoint. Add in the harsh weather, the maintenance strain on coasters that were never designed for repeated cold weather operation, and the constant closures, it becomes pretty obvious why Holiday in the Park faded out after 2021. As much as I loved seeing Great America lit up for the holidays, it wasn't enough to overcome the reality that people come to this park for roller coasters. And if the rides can't run, or barely anyone is around to ride them, the whole thing stops being worth it. At the end of the day, Holiday in the Park was a magical idea in the wrong climate, and that alone sealed its fate. I, along with many others, will cherish the 4 years that Great America hosted this event. It was spectacular while it lasted. I'd love for you to share your favorite Holiday in the Park memories in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like. Thanks for watching, everyone, and happy holidays.